So, as I was saying, one of the reasons why I chose to work with La Casa was because I thought that having my all of my students work there together would give our class and several classes throughout the semesters a sense of unity that would be stronger compared to having students go to different organizations across town. So now I'd like to move on to talk about a few of the um, things that I discovered as I did this type of work. First, I feel like I learned that you have to be willing to make adjustments. It often happens that you have a plan, no, and you're you have a syllabus and there's certain expectations for the semester, etc. But the truth is that when you're adding a component such as service learning or CBL to your classes, there needs to be an understanding, no, that not everything will be under your control. So you will have to make adjustments as you go along to try to make the partnership continue to work. No, for instance, no, early on in my first year, especially teaching my CBL courses, there would be events planned, no, for my students, along with the students at La Casa de Amistad, that never came to fruition because of funding challenges, etc. No, logistical issues that would come up. So that would be an example of ways in which you need to kind of let go of complete control of the course and realize that there's a certain element of unpredictability. But when I talk about being willing to make adjustment, it also refers to the way that you have envisioned the class. So my CBL courses have changed a lot from the very first year that I taught them all the way to this last year. For instance, in that span of 5 years, I learned that certain things needed to change. I first came at it thinking that I would just add the CBL component to my courses and without necessarily thinking that I would change the content of those classes. No. But as time went on, I realized that making some adjustments to the works we were reading in class and going through the extra work of finding materials that would be more in consonance with the uh, experiences of my students at La Casa would probably be more productive. So, from my original intention, which was to continue teaching Latino Caribbean literature classes, I actually ended up, even the first semester I taught the CBL class, I ended up adding a component of Mexican American literature, and then I expanded that to Central American literature because I knew that most of the students that La Casa serves are of Mexican origin. So I needed my students to have a sound and solid background knowledge on that particular group, no, before they could embark on this on their work there. Okay, so another thing I learned was that it's always really important to keep lines of communication open, both between um, with my students and but also with the community partner. Okay, so sometimes I work as a link between both. Um, Students have different needs. Community partners have different needs. I have my own that things that I bring to the table, goals that I have for my students, etc. So all of that needs to be synchronized at various levels, no, so that the partnership works out. But keeping those lines of communication open is incredibly important. So there needs to be feedback from students, from to La Casa, from me to La Casa, from La Casa to me, and La Casa to the students. So it's like it has to go in different directions, no? Another thing I learned is that there needs to be room for creativity. Like we need to allow to have room for creativity. This is something that I saw reflected in terms of final projects for my classes, and we've gone through a whole range of different models during these 5 years. The early on, my students would produce, in conjunction with students at La Casa, different. This is a booklet that was produced with the Crece Conmigo students who are in K through 6th grade, and this utilize some of their drawings, and they would talk to my students about their plans for the future. No, so that's why it's called My Future. And the idea was to create a booklet that the students could read in Spanish and in English, because we're also trying to foment literacy and the love of reading. So we thought that having creating a booklet that would showcase their work would be a way to do that. We also did something similar with the older students, 7th and 8th grade. This was at another project from a different semester, in which they shared stories or essays about themselves in conjunction with my students, who would also interview them and also present their own reflections. So the booklet has works by my students and students at La Casa. There were several semesters that my students produced what we called research briefs, and these were on a range of topics that were selected through with the help of La Casa staff. And here's one about the advantages of bilingualism. These projects were produced both in English and in Spanish, and they were distributed in the community, especially at La Casa, but at other venues too, so that the community could benefit from them. Here's one that was produced. This required quite a bit of archival research. This is about the history of La Casa de Amistad. And my students did, the two students who work on this project did interviews with the founders, and they looked through boxes and boxes of pictures and selected, material to tell the history of La Casa de Amistad, which had never been done before. Another one of the most popular ones was also produced by two of my students, and the topic is Without Documents but Not Without Options, Applying to and Paying for Your Future. So this is a research brief that again was also produced in Spanish, and has a lot of information on why should you attend college, why you need to start working on it from early on, before your 3rd and 4th year in high school, as well as information on colleges in the area that accept undocumented students. This was done before Notre Dame actually began accepting undocumented students. So, and also tips for parents, as well as tips for information on scholarships, specifically for undocumented students. So a whole lot of information right there, and that was pretty widely distributed. So these are just some of the types of projects that we have done. In the last year, I've moved more towards a model where my students are writing a final paper on a literary work, but they have been conducting interviews with students at La Casa, and they come up with a student profile that La Casa can use in their applications for funding from United Way, etc., because they usually have to give some information about the families and showcase some of their success stories. So these interviews and final student profiles have helped with that. So, basically what I want to illustrate is that you have to be creative, you have to let your students be creative, but also always within the, the parameters of what your course is about. But also, it's important, key actually, to keep the needs of the community partner in mind, no, because it has to get to a position where both the needs of the course, that I have designed, as well as the needs of La Casa are being met. So we all have to, come to an agreement about what that looks like. Another thing that I have discovered is that, you tend to have to continually remind students that they need to be active agents in their own learning. Sometimes they're going to see direct correlations between material studied in class and what they're living at La Casa, but that doesn't always happen. So for that, I have created a set of questions that I include in my syllabus that allows them to reflect on their experiences on a weekly basis. It's also super important to remind them that they are not there to do charity work, but that they're there to learn. No, it's a give and take, goes in both directions, and it's incredibly important that they don't come in. And this is something that's stressed very much at the beginning of the semester. They're not going to La Casa to save anyone, no, but rather to learn. No, they're gonna give their best in terms of being tutors and mentors, but they're gonna be learning a lot, and they need to be open to that. So that's, and finally, I would say another thing I've discovered is really not to get discouraged. When you try something and it doesn't work out, move on and try something else. Get feedback from students, get feedback from the organization, and you can keep trying new approaches. No, there's not one way to do CBL, and you can really mold it and create it in a way that fits your academic needs, but at the same time helps the organization that you're partnering with. Okay, so in terms of best practices, to kind of wrap up here, I would say start off the semester having some the students read about service learning and CBL. There's been some really good studies published on this from different perspectives in terms of disciplines. So it's really important to have very concrete conversations about what does CBL look like, what can they expect, what are their fears, challenges that they see along the way. This is all before they start, so that at the end of the semester they can reflect on how they feel towards CBL, and 100% of the cases they feel completely different from what they felt on day one. So I also, in terms of best practices, I would say that journaling is a core component of service learning and CBL. Students need to be constantly reflecting on the impact that CBL is having in their education and in their growth as people. No, so journaling on their service experience every time they go to a site. Afterwards, is, to me, has been very important. Have students do that. It's also important to build discussion time within the course of the semester to have these more in-depth conversations with students about how things are going for them at La Casa, challenges, so that they can share ideas on how to tackle certain obstacles that they might find, whatever it is. And a final course reflection has also been key for my courses. I have students write a 4 to 5 page final reflection where they answer a set of questions, prompts that I give them, so that they reflect on how has this experience helped them in their academic understanding of the topics of the semester, but also beyond that, no. And for instance, when it comes to reflections from this semester, I have a lot of students who commented on how CBL had made them a better person. Many of them also commented on how it made them feel part of the South Bend community, and I think that's really important if we take into account that part of Notre Dame's mission is to establish deeper links with the community. So that's one thing that really stands out. This sentiment that they now feel part of the community and that they want to do something about it. Others commented on how, or have commented over the past years, on how the CBL component made them more engaged academically, because all of a sudden the material they were seeing in class came to life. They were invested in it. They wanted to learn more. So it really captured their interest in a way that wouldn't have happened if the class hadn't had the CBL component, or that's how they put it usually in their evaluations, that it was key to have that. And there's many other benefits that come along with it, beyond understanding a lot more about the immigrant situation and what does it mean to be part of an immigrant family in South Bend. People have opened their eyes to the injustices around them, the racism, the hindrances when it comes to educational opportunities for Latinos. Students have even commented on how sheltered they used to be, and thanks to this or that class, that they took with me with the CBL component, now they are aware that this is happening, and it has made them more interested to follow the news and be active participants in terms of changing things, in the future. So overall, it really has been an incredibly powerful tool for my Latino literature courses, and I truly believe that this is something that can be molded, adapted by instructors, professors in different disciplines. So I hope to have convinced you to at least think about it, and please feel free to contact me if you have any questions. Thank you.